With the Shavuot 2022 studies. This is session number 3. And session 3 is session 2 continued. Are all the people of God automatically the bride? And what makes people think they are? Who's the bridal party? And is the real bride even aware that she is the bride? So by now you understand the 4 covenants. You understand the 4 areas around the tabernacle. You understand the 4 positions. You have seen what the color is for each covenant. You've also seen the action that is to be taken for each covenant. Let's look at the rest, the status, the item, the school, the cup, the Shekinah proximity, and the relationship. All right, so we've looked at the servant, which is the first of the 4 covenants, the blood covenant. We've seen that everybody is servant, all have come out of Egypt, all is under the blood covenant, all have done the action of repentance. Now coming to the status of the people in the blood covenant, the servants, all the people in the tent, the 3 million people around the tabernacle. Their status is that of servanthood, which is obeying and serving. So under the blood covenant, when you just come into the camp, into the kingdom of Yahuwah, you are looking at obeying and serving, and you grow in your obedience, you grow in your service, and out of that you start growing into the next covenant. Revelation 11 verse 2, but the court which is outside the temple, leave that. Don't measure it, for that is given unto the Gentiles. So the outside area, the outer court outside the whole tabernacle, where all the hundreds and thousands of tents are, that is the area where you don't want to stay in. You can, if you want to, you can stay there, but during the tribulation periods that's lying ahead, don't you think it will be wise to move closer? Move up into the covenants, move up into your status, move up into your colors so that you can combine all the colors into the white. Do you think it's a good idea to stay in this first covenant? Because looking at the end times in Revelation, the outer court area outside the temple, the area outside the temple will be given unto the Gentiles. It will be trodden down. It will be destroyed by the Gentile nations that's not inside the camp of God. So my suggestion is, and my understanding of this is, it's not the safest place to stay during the end time tribulations. So as a servant, you also die to yourself. As the servant, part of your obedience and serving, you fight against your own sinful nature. This is the status of the servant. This is how you grow into the kingdom of God. This is only the first step. Die to yourself, fight against your sinful nature, and for that, please go and read Galatians 1:10, Romans 6:16, Romans 7:22, Romans 12, verse 1 and 2. You grow from servant to friend into the next covenant. You know that it's not all servants that's friends. You proceed through the covenants. You proceed from the tent area closer to the holiest place. And out of the crowd of 3 million people in the tents, only the heads of families proceed closer, right? So the status of friendship is obedience and loving God. So where your servanthood was obedience and serve, when you become a friend, you obey and love. You start to get to know God as a friend, and you start to love him as a friend. Abraham was called a friend of God, and God knew that he could trust Abraham, his friend, and that Abraham is the kind of friend that will intercede if God shared his judgment plans with Abraham. You remember how this happened in the book of Genesis with Sodom and Gomorrah. God said to himself, can I trust Abraham? Can I tell Abraham what I'm going to do? Does God view me as a friend such as Abraham? Or am I just serving? Am I just still a servant? Serving God with all my heart and getting comfortable in a servant position where I am getting 3 square meals a day, getting filled with His knowledge, and I'm getting filled with His love, but I'm not standing in for anybody else. Like Abraham, the friend of God, did when he stood in for Sodom and Gomorrah. The servant doesn't stand in for other people, but the servant that grows into a friend, he will. Because he starts loving his king as a friend, he will stand in for the kingdom as a friend. When you grow from servant to friend and then to inheritance, to son and daughter, the color is blue. Not all servants become friends and not all friends become children. You proceed through the 3 areas of salvation, dedication, into inheritance. You leave the tents, you come into the inner court area, you go through the outer court into the inner court, you come closer to the ark, and neither anybody from the crowd nor the heads of the families is allowed. So in our understanding of this journey that we are following, the servants and the friends are not allowed in the inner court. So you proceed from those statuses into the next status, which is that the status of sonship, of child, being a child. Now you obey, you love, and you intercede. You step into ministry like a priest. Remember, the sandal covenant is this inheritance covenant that where you find yourself as a son and daughter. And when you find yourself in this status of obeying like a servant, loving like a friend, and starting to really intercede for the kingdom of God, then you step into a ministry. And that's why the sandal covenant is so important. Moving from servant to friend to child to bride, we're going to look at the parable of the wedding feast. When Yeshua saw how they chose the best seats, he said unto them, when you are invited to a wedding, don't sit down in the biggest or the best chair, lest a more honorable man than yourself has been invited. And then the bridegroom will come to you and say, please stand up, give this man a place. And then with shame, you'll have to get up off your seat and move to a lower area in the room, a seat there in the back of the room. But when you are invited, go and sit down in the back of the room, that when he that invited you sees you, then he can say, friend, come up higher, come sit here by me. Then you shall have respect in the presence of them that sit in the wedding feast. For whoever exalts himself shall be abased, and he that humbles himself shall be exalted. Don't ever assume that you are the bride. The true bride is not arrogant. She is more like Messiah himself than anyone else. Because she was the best servant ever, the most dedicated friend ever, the most hard-working son ever. And without her even realizing it, she became the bride. While working in God's kingdom, her love for her king and for her king's people is eating her up, so much that she does not even think about her reward anymore. Too many people just assume they are automatically the bride, and too many people want to take the best position in the kingdom. And unfortunately, they might just be surprised, like this man who had with shame to take another seat in the wedding feast, because he assumed he can just go in and sit at the best seat. So the token for the servant is skins. The blood covenant always requires skins, because the skin is what is left after the sacrifice has been brought. The olam sacrifice is the whole burnt offering, and in the Torah it is described that the priest is allowed to keep the skin for himself of the animal that is brought for the whole burnt offering. So in Genesis 3 verse 21, we see that our high priest has brought the first sacrifice and he kept the skin for himself, and that is what he dressed us with. So everybody in the tent area, everybody in the forecourt area outside the temple, All of us are under the blood covenant. All of us are wearing skins. Our sacrifice is Messiah, and we wear Messiah. We are under his blood. Our token is skins. Every servant of God. Of the whole crowd of 3 million people, we are all under the blood covenant, and our token is skins. Blood sacrifices always have skins left over. So the token for the friendship covenant is a meal. The friendship covenant is the salt covenant. And covenants are always cemented with, with a meal that is shared between friends. A meal where salt is used. The salt covenant is a meal covenant. Yahuwah had a meal with his friend Abraham. Exactly before he told Abraham that Isaac the son would be born. Beautiful. How the king had a meal with his friend. Salt was used in the meal. And after that meal together, where the covenant was cemented together, God promised the son shall be born. So they ate together before Yahuwah started revealing more about his plans to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah to his friend Abraham. Because in the friendship covenant, you have progressed from the servant covenant. And as friend, the king will reveal more to you because you are closer to him. And your token is the meal. Then in the son and daughter covenant, we are looking at the Torah as our item. And as you remember, the color blue is something that reminds us of the Torah. When you received your king, your master or your father's direct instructions in Hebrew is Torah, then you remove the sandals of your feet in his presence. Remember Moses, Exodus 3 verse 5? And this is the sandal covenant. When you come into this area, where you remove your sandals, then you receive instruction. Priests enter the holy place always barefoot. You remove your sandals before you enter into the inner court. Can you see how the sandal covenant and the inner court area and the closer to the holiest place, only by the priests, how this is symbolizing for us how the road towards more intimacy with God is also a road where less and less people travel on. So the sandal covenants beautifully explain to us when we receive the Torah, when we meet with our Messiah, and we take off our shoes. So the white garments is the token or the item for the bridal covenant. The white garments, as Revelation 19 verse 8 says, is the righteous deeds of the saints. In the blood covenant, we wear the skins of the blood sacrifice. But in the bridal covenant, we wear the white garments, which is the righteous deeds of the saints. And as we learn through the servant and the friend and the son covenants, in the servant covenant, we're willing to die for ourselves. We die to ourselves. But in the bridal covenant, we're willing to die for our God. We are willing to die for our God's kingdom. It's no longer about ourselves. In the servant covenant, it's all about, oh, I'm being persecuted. I'm being judged by the world. I'm struggling on this road. This is a difficult road. It's all about yourself and how you have to die to yourself. But coming through these covenants, we wear the righteous clothes of Messiah, the white garments. And here we have overcome ourselves in the servant covenant. We have overcome the world. We have overcome Hasatan. And now we are also busy overcoming the end time tribulation. This is the white garments of the bride. In the servant covenant, we are looking at the school. The next section is the school or the lesson. And the lesson for the servant is the living Torah. Here we learn to gather knowledge. The gathering of the knowledge is the introduction to the living Torah. When we say living Torah, we talk about the Torah written on stone that has become flesh, the Torah of our God. When he spoke his Torah, his instructions, when he said, let there be light, it was an instruction, it was a Torah. And everything from the mouth of God that he spoke is his word, and his word became flesh, and that is Messiah. Messiah is our Torah. He is our written and living Torah. So in the servant covenant, in the first covenant, everybody under the blood covenant is introduced to the Torah. Now you only start to get to know the Torah, and you start to gather knowledge of the Torah. Beautiful. Salvation under the blood covenant is your entrance into the nation of Israel. Your introduction to the instructions of this God, who is different than all the other gods. You leave Egypt and Babylon, that's only your first step. But here we don't stay. It's good to be in this covenant, but you can't stay here, because is this the safest place that you will be during the tribulation in the end times? Is this the closest you can be to God? But if you're happy in this covenant, it's fine. The whole kingdom of God is represented by these 4 covenants. Shavuot was meant for the whole camp to become bright. But unfortunately, as you saw, most people wanted to just return to their tents. They wanted to return to normal. They wanted to just, be part of the kingdom, but not really struggle or drink the bitter cup or go through any tribulation or really work hard for God or stand in for the people. They just wanted to have a bit of a comfortable life. But they are in the covenant of the olive tree. They are under the blood. They have been saved from Egypt. Let's look at the lessons or the school in the next covenant. The next covenant is the friendship covenant, the sandal covenant, the salt covenant. I'm getting confused now. So the lesson here is understanding the living Torah. You grow from introduction to the living Torah. You grow into understanding the living Torah. Now we learn the Torah. We get to know the God of Israel. But again, we don't stay here. Knowledge and understanding is amazing. But without wisdom, it is just not getting you all the way into the promised land. It's like leaving Egypt, getting to know God and God's ways through the wilderness journey, and then staying in the wilderness, never going through the wilderness to enter into the promised land, to finally enter into the holiest of holies, to finally enter into the inner chamber of the bridegroom. So you have to start gathering the knowledge as well. And that's where it comes in, growing from servant to friend to son. The school or the lesson for the next covenant is now we start making huge decisions by the living Torah. So you're introduced to the Torah, you start understanding the Torah. That's how you grow. It takes time, it takes effort. And now you start getting to the point where you make big life decisions. Now you start living the Torah. It's no longer just head knowledge, but now you start making decisions in your life with the power of knowledge and understanding that you learned while being a servant and that you understood while being a friend. Knowledge to do his work, but understanding what his work is now brings you the wisdom to know the goal, the end goal of his work. And all of this will lead us into the final bridal covenant, where the school is we now love the living Torah. We now live and love the Torah. We reflect Torah. We live by it in our daily lives, but in our innermost being as well. Because now we are in his presence. We're no longer in the tents. We're no longer in the outer or inner court, but right at his feet, in his presence, seeing him face to face, through the Torah, through the gathering the knowledge of the Torah, understanding the Torah, gaining wisdom of the Torah. We now, through the Torah, see God face to face. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 16. Go and read for yourself. The next thing we are learning is the cups of each one of these covenants. So in the servant covenant, we drink the first cup, or the cup of sanctification. Here I remind you that the Pesach 2022 two-tree study will give you a lot more information about the 4 cups, as well as the progression of the betrothal and the marriage ceremony, where 4 cups are also drank. And how beautifully does it fit in now with the 4 covenants. So in the ketubah, the whole family drinks the first cup together during the first step of the marriage ceremony. This cup is for the whole family. This cup is for all of Israel, everybody living in the tents, everybody under the blood covenant. So these 2 families, when they come together in marriage, they are now bound by this first cup into the covenant vows. And again, we see this in Pesach as well, the first cup of sanctification. So the cup we drink in the next covenant is the cup of dedication. So you become a friend, and now not all servants become friends. So not everybody drinking of the first cup can drink of the second cup, because the second cup is during the ketubah process is only the fathers of the family that, as representatives of the 2 families, drink the second cup together. The families now become friends, and this is the friendship covenant, and this is the second cup. And Yeshua says in John 15 verse 14, "You are my friends if you do what I command you." So by understanding the living Torah, to do what Yeshua commands by the living Torah, you now proceed to the second cup, because you have proceeded to become a friend. Do you see the correlations? And now we proceed to the third cup in the son covenant, in the sandal covenant, to become sons and daughters. Here we drink the third cup, the cup of redemption, or the cup of inheritance. So during the ketubah process, the bridegroom drinks the third cup, and now they are betrothed. So the moment the bridegroom and bride is betrothed, although the marriage ceremony hasn't been completed yet and the marriage hasn't been consummated yet, the bride and bridegroom is now betrothed. And in this inheritance covenant of the son, progressing from servant to friend to son, the moment you are betrothed, the moment the third cup is drunk, right? Even if the bridegroom dies while he's going away to prepare a place, and then he's going to come back to come fetch his bride, even in that time period, if he dies, the woman, the bride, will inherit everything of her husband, even though they're not husband and wife yet. Like we are not husband and wife yet. We have not seen the marriage supper of the Lamb yet. It's only happening after the tribulation. But yet we are already sons and daughters. We are in the inheritance covenant, and we can drink from the inheritance cup. We progress from servant to friend to son, from first to second to third cup, but along the way, lots of people stay behind, and fewer people are progressing on this narrow road. The cup for the bridal covenant finally is the cup of praise. So the bride and bridegroom drink together this last and final cup at the ceremony. Finally, at the ceremony. No family, no friends, no servant, no son, no daughter, no father, only the bridegroom and the bride. They also drank of all the other cups. And the bride and the bridegroom has been part of this whole ceremony throughout all the cups and all the covenants and all the areas. But in the end, it's only these two that will drink this last cup together. The rest of the wedding party also drinks, all of them drink the first cup, some of them drink the second one, some of those drink the third one. So everybody in the wedding party has had his share of one of these cups. Some of the people in the wedding party are servants. Some of them are guests sitting at the table. Some of them are family sitting at the bridal table. but only the bride and the bridegroom will enter into the holiest of holies, into the inner chamber, and drink the fourth cup together. So the bride is not arrogant ever. She doesn't assume anything, because the moment you understand what is going to be required of you when you are going to partake in the fourth cup, a lot of people might say, maybe it's not such a great idea. Maybe I must just be a servant or a guest or a friend or a son or a daughter. Maybe I was too arrogant to think I'm the bride. Because when you want to have the seat next to Yeshua, when you want to have the seat of the queen, the bride that's married to the king becomes the queen. When you want to sit in the queen's throne, you must be very careful when you request that, because there was 2 men in the Bible that requested that. This is the 2 sons of thunder, John and James, or Yaakov, Yochanan and Yaakov. They requested from Yeshua the best seats right next to Yeshua, one on the left, one on the right. And they asked him that that's where they want to sit. And Yeshua answered them like this in Matthew chapter 20. He said, "You don't even know what you are asking of me. Do you think you're able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of? Are you able to be baptized with a baptism that I am baptized with?" So we must be careful. Again, I say, Queen, get off your throne. Understand that the best place next to the king is reserved for the queen that drinks the same cup as her Messiah. And here I'm no longer talking about the fourth cup of praise. That will be the cup of celebration. I'm talking about the cup that Messiah says that those who become like him will drink the cup like him, the bitter cup. And those that wants to be baptized with his baptism will be baptized with a fire, which we've already seen together through Bible study, is the baptism of fire of persecution and trials and tribulation and testing, the testing of the fire, through which the gold becomes pure and the bride becomes white. So we must be careful what we ask, and we must be careful what we claim, because these 2 guys were a little bit arrogant. They answered Yeshua when he asked them, "Are you able to drink the cup?" They answered him and said, "Yes, we are able." The bride is scared of the bitter cup lying ahead of her, but she still sees herself as a servant and a friend and a child of God. The bride does not automatically assume that she is able to drink the same cup as what her husband drank. To see if you're able to drink the cup of your husband will only be revealed by the test of time, by the testing of the tribulation. Therefore, we must stop claiming that we are automatically the bride. And we must be very careful about boasting and being arrogant about being the bride. We are going to see beautifully how this is explained to us in the life of Peter. All right, so that was the item for the 4 covenants, the school or the lessons for the 4 covenants, and the 4 cups, each one for one of the 4 covenants. Let's look next at the Shekinah Proximity. So Shekinah Proximity, here I want to try and explain how far away from the Shekinah we are, the distance from the Shekinah. So the people on the outskirts of the camp is, of course, the furthest away from the Shekinah. Shekinah is the burning presence of God on the mercy seat above the Ark of the Covenant in the holiest of holies. So the people in the tents are the furthest away. The people in the outer court are closer. The people in the inner court are even closer. And then, of course, the high priest inside the holiest of holies is right at the Shekinah. He's not far at all. So The distance between yourself and the actual presence of Yahuwah above the mercy seat is the Shekinah proximity. Yes, of course, he is present to all the people in the camp. He's present with the whole camp. But only a very few people come close enough to actually say that they have been in his very Shekinah presence. Working on the calculations of Numbers chapter 1, there were about 630 men of war. These are all the men 20 years and older. Most men 20 years and older were married already, so we multiply by 2 and we get 1.2 million. Most married couples had many children, but even if we work on only 2 kids per couple, we get 2.5 million bodies. Add all the Egyptians and the strangers and the sojourners together, and that is how we then get to approximately 3 million people in the camp. Remember, the men that was counted was only 20 and higher, so all the men 20 from 12 to 20 were counted as men. So you count all those together, and some families had 12 children, and some families maybe had no children. But if we work on very conservative numbers, it's easy to see why we suggest there was about 3 million people in the camp. Right. So if I work conservatively on only 1 square meter per tent in which 4 people lives, of course this is ridiculous, but I'm just working on an average, just for argument's sake. Then it means that the people in the tents that were living in all the tents were about between 50 and 187 kilometers away from the Shekinah, from the holiest of holies. All right? On average, let's work on 60 kilometers, all right, just to get an average. So on average, the people that is in the first covenant, the people that is in the tents, their Shekinah proximity is about 60 kilometers. Millions of people, the whole of Israel, the whole forecourt area, the camping area, life goes on normal. Here the people are far away from the Shekinah. They're far away from all the things happening in the outer court while the sacrifices are brought. They are far away from the hustle and the bustle and the hard work and the dedication and the washing and the holiness of the inner court area. And they are very far away from poor Aaron, who risks his life every time he goes into the holiest of holies. So in the tent area under the servant covenant, where everybody that is saved by the blood is part of, here 60 kilometers away from the Shekinah, life goes on normal. It's comfortable, it's easy, it's not too bad. But we don't stay here. Because remember, Revelation said the forecourt, the area outside the temple, will be trampled by the Gentiles. We don't want to stay here. You don't want to stay in the tents and only hear about the amazing stories that the heads of the families are telling you as they return from the sacrifice outer court area. You don't want to stay in the tents and hear about all the wonderful experiences of the priests in the holy place. You don't want to stay here and only dream about the unbelievable relationship that the high priest has, who had entered behind the veil. No, you want to move closer. You want to move into the friendship covenant, where the Shekinah proximity is only 30 meters, right? The outer court area. You move from the tent area into the outer court area. Now, the outer court area is only about 30 meters away from the Shekinah. So we come closer now. As heads of the families, we may enter the altar area for the sacrifices, where the offerings are brought. Leviticus 2:13 says, salt is used in every offering, and that is why this is the salt covenant. Remember, we are busy with the salt covenant. Only the heads of the families come here, but then also they only visit. Remember, the heads of the families come to bring the sacrifices. But after they've done with the sacrifices, they go back to the tents. Priests stay behind. Because the priests are dedicated. The salt covenant is the dedication covenant. The priests are dedicated to stay in this area and bring the sacrifices, because they are salted and they are baptized with fire and salted with salt. Just like Yeshua says in Mark 9:49, everyone shall be salted with fire, and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt. Because the people that have grown into this covenant are the people of Matthew 5, verse 13, that says, where Yeshua said, we are the salt of the earth. Sacrifices must be tasty. We must be tasty to the world. We must have the meal where salt is used to make the meal tasty. We must be tasty in our witness to the world. We cannot be bland with no salt. So we have to grow from the blood covenant to the salt covenant. We have to grow from the tent area to the outer court area. But again, we don't want to stay here. We want the Shekinah proximity of that of a son and a daughter, where the Shekinah proximity is only 5 to 15 meters. Remember here, we are now moving into the inner court. And only the sons and daughters can move into the inner court. And here we are only 5 to 15 meters away from the father and the inner chamber of the bridegroom. Here we have our inheritance, because we are already so much closer. Remember, here we are also barefoot, because this is the sandal covenant. So we remove our sandals from our feet, and like a child, we develop the heart of the priest. Like children who never wear sandals, we come into the inner court, where we learn about the light, the menorah, the bread on the showbread table, the fragrance of the incense altar. We are getting so close. You cannot only see and hear much more, but you start smelling the incense and you feel the heart of God here, and you can feel the heat of the menorah on your face, and you can sense the presence of God behind the veil. In the next covenant, your Shekinah proximity is you can enter right into the Shekinah, because here we move to the bridal covenant. Here we move to the marriage covenant, into the holiest place. There's nobody else with us. We are coming closer and closer to the holiest. All the other covenants are combined. The positions are combined. All the other colors are combined. And here we are willing to die for the king. Just like the high priest who's willing to die every time he goes behind the veil. You will remember in the Torah, it is said that the garments of the high priest must have bells at the bottom. And as the high priest walks around behind the veil on Yom Kippur, the people can hear the bells moving. But the moment the bells stop making a sound, it might be that the high priest died in the presence of God, because he wasn't prepared. He wasn't in the right covenant, in the right state of repentance, in the right state of holiness, to even enter into this most holy place. And then they would drag him out by his feet, put a rope around his feet when he goes in, and if the bells stop making a sound, they will drag him out. So in the Shekinah proximity, the bride, not like the servants, no servant is willing to die. You know, even the friends or the sons or the daughters, they're not really willing to die. But when you grow into this covenant, you are willing to die, not only for your own persecution, because you are persecuted, but you're willing to die for, because you are, as the, remember us, I explained, we don't say that we are the high priest. We cannot be. We are not Levites. We are not from the family of Aaron. But as in the position, or in the willingness to work, to stand in for all the camp, The high priest is willing to die for the camp by him taking the risk and taking the responsibility on him of entering into the most holy with the risk that he can die. But he goes in there to bring the blood onto the mercy seat that will cover the sins of everybody in the camp. Our high priest Yeshua was willing to do that for us. And as we progress into bridal covenant, we become willing to do that as well. That's why Yeshua said, you have to drink my cup. You have to be baptized with my fire. Because most people are not willing to do this. Therefore, I say, Queen, get off your throne. Because if you want to be queen, you must be willing to die, to enter into the Shekinah. There's no sunlight in the holiest area. There's no menorah. There's only the burning presence of Yahuwah on the mercy seat. The ketubah, the written Torah on stone, is inside the Ark of the Covenant. And the mercy seat is on top of that. And the Shekinah glory is on top of that. Because the mercy seat is the throne of God. And the Bible says the foundation of God's throne is justice and judgment, because that is the Torah. The Torah describes justice and judgment. You are so close now that you can just reach out your hand and you can touch the ketubah that's within the Ark of the Covenant. But you are alone. There's no servant, no friend, and no son or daughter with you. It's only you and God. There's no family member. There's no guest. It's only you and the King. You stand alone and barefoot and cleansed and humble before him, willing to die like the high priest. Even if you close your eyes and your ears and your nose, you sense God with all five your senses in this heavenly, holy, special place that's destined for the bride alone. All right, let us look at the next lesson that we are learning, and that's about the relationship for each one of these covenants. So we progress from the master to servant relationship. We progress into the king and friend relationship. From that, we progress into the father-child relationship. And from that, we progress into the husband-wife relationship. So the husband-wife relationship, as you progress from servant to friend to child to bride, is all about getting married. The bridegroom wants to marry a bride. He does not want to marry a servant. He does not want to marry a friend. He does not want to marry a child. That is his ultimate desire. His love for his servants and friends and children is not less when he takes a bride, especially when the bride loves and cares for the kingdom as much as he does. He gave his life for his servants, friends, and children. But his ultimate desire is that servants, friends, and children all become part of the bride. Is that possible? Are we worthy of him as he is worthy of us? That's the husband-wife relationship. And is this bride worthy for this worthy husband to betroth her, to marry her? Because when a man loves a woman, when Messiah loves his bride, he has to become worthy of her. And Messiah has become worthy of a fantastic, amazing, noble, virtuous woman. He aspires to marry her. He has done everything for the bride so he can marry her. And that is why we believe that Messiah deserves a worthy bride. And while I am servant, I will rejoice when Messiah finds his worthy bride. Even if I find myself in the kingdom of God, still just a servant. There's no jealousy. the real servant of God, the real friend of God, the real son and daughter of God will never be jealous amongst themselves, like the brides of this world, like the religions of this world where everybody is so jealous of one another. Oh, I'm the bride. Oh, how can you say I'm not the bride? The real servant, friend, son and daughter who's got a bridal heart will even be willing to go and sit down in the lowest seat in the room and give preference. For me, for instance, I mean, Abram, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Rebecca, Sarah, Rachel, Leah, David, Solomon, Daniel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Matthew, John, Peter, Paul, Timothy. Listen, who the hell do I think I am to claim that I'm the bride when I've got all these people in front of me someone now can tell you, I know automatically they are the bride. I cannot even put myself in the same league as them. So the question remains for me to you in this year, celebrating Shavuot in 2022. Who is the bride? Because as we proceed from servant to friend to son and daughter to bride, as we proceed, there's more and more intimacy. As we proceed, there's more and more responsibility. Everybody wants the intimacy. Oh yes, give me more intimacy, God. Please, I want to know you better, God. But more responsibility? I don't know if I like that one so much. As we proceed, there's more and more authority. Yes, people like that. They like the fact that in the name of this and this, I now demand that and that. People like to have more authority and more intimacy, but do they like more responsibility? This husband king deserves that every single one of his servants, friends, and children would give their lives to become closer to him, to make that Shekinah proximity decrease from 60 kilometers to nothing. Therefore, strive to be purified, not just to be part of the crowd in the tents or outer courts, but strive to go in. He deserves the best white linen and the purest gold. Therefore, we need to go through the furnace to be cleansed, purified and made holy for him. He deserves a messianic bride. He deserves that every one of us, if we want to sit like John and James next to him on the throne, he deserves a bride that's willing to drink his cup and be baptized with his fire. Titus 2 verse 14, who gave himself to us Messiah, so that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. This is what Messiah deserves. This is what the bridegroom deserves. A purified, peculiar people, zealous of good works. Daniel 12, many shall be purified, many shall be made white, and they will be tried, but the wicked will do wickedly. None of the wicked will understand any of this. Only the wise virgins shall understand. And we also understand that those who are made white are those who are tried and tested. And they are the ones that's purified. And they are the ones that's redeemed to be dressed in white. Therefore, strive to be purified. Do not just be part of the crowd in the tents or the outer courts, but strive to go in. Strive to be dedicated, not just part of the average service in the tabernacle. No, strive to go in. Luke 13, strive to enter in at the straight gate. For many, I tell you, will seek to enter, but shall not be able. 2 Timothy 2 verse 1 to 7. Now therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Messiah Yeshua, and the things that you have heard of me among many witnesses. The same you must go and teach other faithful men, so that they can go and teach other faithful men also. This is the heart of the bride. She learns from the Bible. Then she teaches others what she has learned, and she teaches them in such a way that they can go and teach others again. Thou therefore endure hardness, O my bride, O Timotheus, as a good soldier of Messiah. This is the heart of the bride. You will understand that you will endure hardness. No man that wars entangles himself with the affairs of life, because when you go into the war, you do that so that you can please him who has chosen you to be a soldier. You don't care about yourself anymore. You care about your king. And if a man strive for masteries, yet he is not crowned, except he strives lawfully. So when you strive to go in like this, but you don't do it lawfully, you shall not be crowned. But if you do it lawfully, according to the Torah, you shall be crowned. The husbandman that labors must be first partaker of the fruits. Consider what I say. Consider it, guys. And let Yahuwah give you understanding in all of these things. I pray, Yahuwah, that you will give understanding to all your beautiful servants out there that is so willing and so desirous to just please understand all these things, Father. We need to understand because we want to please you, our King. We want to strive to enter in. We understand it is a straight gate. We understand there will be many that think they can get in, but they will not get in. It will only be a few. Help us to be many witnesses and to commit what we learn to other people so that they can teach also. Help us to be a soldier of Messiah, not to care about the affairs of life anymore, but to really strive to enter in to the holiest of holies. Session 3 was all about the question, why do people think they are automatically the bride? And does the real bride even know that she is the bride? I hope you enjoyed the study. I hope the study makes you think. And I hope that you will do session number 4 with me as well. May you be blessed in Messiah Yeshua.